We'll start with breaking news out of Gabon. Senior members of the military have appeared on television this morning saying they are now in control of the oil-rich Central African country. They've ordered all institutions to be dissolved. Military leaders also announced the cancellation of Saturday's election results. The Electoral Commission says that President Ali Bongo won a third term in office. He's said to have got nearly 65% of the vote.
À cela s'ajoute une gouvernance irresponsable.
After noting an irresponsible, unpredictable governance which results in a continuous deterioration of social cohesion that risks leading the country to chaos, today, the 30th of August 2023, in the name of the Gabonese people, we, the Committee of the Transition and the Restoration of Institutions, have decided to defend the peace, putting an end to the regime in place. To this end, the general elections of August 26, 2023, as well as the results, are cancelled. The borders of the country are closed until further notice. All the institutions of the Republic are dissolved. The government, the Senate, the National Assembly, the Constitutional Court. We call on the population for calm and serenity. And we affirm our attachment to the respect of Gabon's commitments to the international community.
OK, let me give you some geographical context here, because the Republic of Gabon is situated on the western shores of Central Africa. The country's been run by one family for more than 55 years. Omar Bongo Ondimba was only the second president of Gabon. He came to power in 1967, following the death of the president Leon Mda, who remained there until his death in 2009. Ali Bongo Ondimba succeeded his father and was then re-elected as president in August of 2016. He has so far served 2 7-year terms, and of course on Wednesday it was announced that he had won a third term following Saturday's election. Now, Gabon is the 4th largest oil producer in sub-Saharan Africa. The country is a full member of OPEC. Let's go to Nick Haque, who joins us now live from Dakar. Nicholas, you've covered West and Central Africa extensively. You've been speaking to people in Gabon this morning. What more can you tell us about what's going on there?
Well, from people that I spoke to in certain neighborhood in Libreville, in the capital, there are scenes of joys with hundreds of people taking to the streets, chanting that Gabon is liberated, Gabon is free. It's the end of a one-party system or a family holding on to power for the last 60 years. So there's a real sense of joy in certain neighborhoods. In other neighborhoods, we're seeing the soldiers patrolling the streets. And according to the people that we spoke to, there's uncertainty. Are these troops that are loyal to Ali Bongo, or are these troops that have orchestrated what appears to be a coup? What's interesting is the timing of all of this. So just minutes before this address made by these soldiers on national television, well, the Election Commission had announced the results to Gabon's population, announcing that Ali Bongo had won these elections. And just minutes after, we saw this announcement where we saw members of the military wearing red, green, and black berets. The one speaking was wearing a black beret, suggesting that he was part of the infantry brigade. But there was also civilians showing a united front, saying that this is the end of a regime. And just hours before, the internet was shut down in Gabon following those elections. And so now the Gabonese seem to be able to communicate to each other, and they're waking up to what seems to be a new regime. No news yet of Ali Bongo himself. But I can tell you what, when I spoke to some people before, ahead of the elections or during the election day, they were scared to talk, to communicate, to tell us what was actually happening. And today they're finally telling us how this election took place. Some of them told us they saw a fraud on a massive scale in the capital, Libreville, where people were exchanging their votes against 10,000 CFA bills, or that they saw the military taking out ballot boxes from certain areas of the neighborhood, really trying to fiddle with these elections. There was no international observers there to see what was going on. Our team from Nairobi that was supposed to be there to cover those elections were not allowed in. So this is no surprise that there is such a level of joy given the fact that the situation in this wealthy country, this oil-rich country, has been deteriorating. So while this country is rich in oil, it is poor in terms of the wealth hasn't been trickling down to the population. There was a lot of anger amongst people about that their circumstances have been going from bad to worse in the last few years in under Bongo's presidency. But we still haven't heard from him. We heard from Emmanuel Macron yesterday. There was this announcement, the speech made to all of its ambassadors. And we have to remember that Gabon is a former French colony that is key, a strategic ally to France, both because of its geographical location and both because it's oil rich and that France has profited from this oil in the last couple of years. Well, he said that he is standing for democracy. So it'll be interesting to see how the French react to this coup that just happened under their nose. In Libreville, there's 2 French military bases, 700 French soldiers in the capital itself, and at Port-Gentil in the north of the country, too. Now, it'll be interesting to see how they react to this situation. For the past decades, they have been supporting the regime in place, they say, the democracy in Gabon. But this democracy doesn't speak to everybody in Gabon. As you can see, scenes of joy in certain neighborhoods and a lot of people wondering who's in charge of this country this morning. Marlene?
Very interesting to get your perspective. Nicholas Haque there for us in Dakar. Let's go to Ahmed Idris now. He joins us now live from Niamey, the capital of Niger, where, of course, just last month, the military there also took over power. Ahmed, interesting listening to Nicholas Haque's perspective there about France and what their involvement could be in the future, because this looks like another coup in a francophone Africa. I mean, there seems to be at least a pattern emerging.
Exactly. What happened in Mali 3 years ago set a chain reaction across francophone West and Central Africa. And now the region is fast becoming one of the most politically unstable regions in addition to insecurity as well as economic decline. So basically, people are wondering what's happening. But again, when you talk to political analysts in the region, they will tell you about the deprivations, the economic malaise, the insecurity that's been there, and the inability of governments in power, democratically elected governments in power, to deal with these situations. Corruption is also one of the major factors. And now it will be interesting to see how the African Union reacts to this. We know their initial reaction is to suspend countries, member countries that where coups have taken place. We've seen that with Mali, we've seen that with Burkina Faso, Guinea, and now Niger. And it's expected very soon they will also announce that Gabon is suspended from the membership of the African Union. But what is interesting is we hardly will see any effective sanctions being applied on Gabon simply because of its mineral resources, something that we've seen happening in Mali and Burkina Faso right now. The expectation of many political analysts in West Africa and Central Africa was that when there is a coup, the strangulation, economic strangulation, should be applied to enforce the rule that the military should go back to the barracks and restore democracy. But what we continue to say in these countries is that mining of mineral resources and oil continue in those countries. So basically, people are watching. But here in Niger, people are just waking up to the news, and it will gladden the heart of the military authorities here that at least one other African country have seen their way, at least. Marlene?
OK, Ahmed Idris there for us in Niamey, the capital of Niger. Let's get the perspective of Ovigway Agwaegu. He's a security analyst for Afripolitika, which is a security consultancy. He joins us now from Ankara. Firstly, give us your understanding of what is happening in Gabon at the moment.
Yes, I think with the coup in Gabon, it came as a surprise, but to some extent, not really, because if you go back to 2016, for instance, where there was an election, the election was seen as fraudulent, who protested, and that was Ali Bongo's second election. Then there was a coup attempt in 2019, and they cited the fact that those elections were fraudulent and was not really representative of the will of the people. So if we fast forward to last weekend's election, again, we're seeing the same pattern of people thinking they voted in one direction, or they were never given an opportunity to vote for the candidate that they chose. And that kind of widespread dissatisfaction with the electoral process, I think I have to underscore this fact that the coup in Gabon is very different from what we are seeing in other parts of West Africa, because while that is more about security and governance, this is specifically about the electoral process, because time and time again, we see these patterns repeat in Gabon, and the military comes in and they make the same argument.
That's a very good point that you make there. So what you're saying is there will be support for this coup?
Yes, already. If you look at the streets of Gabon, people are celebrating and celebrating the coup. And even if you look at the statement of the pushes, you would see that they are very much specifically talking about transition and restoration of institutions. So again, that goes back to, like I said, the electoral process, and they're dissolving all of the institutions like the Senate, hoping that in the transition process, they would maybe look at the constitution and also look at how to strengthen state institutions regarding political process.
I guess the question is what happens next and how united is the military in what is taking place right now. We've been listening to our correspondent talk about the influence of France in Gabon, the historical influence, the two military bases that exist in France at the moment. I mean, how do you think that's going to play into things?
Yeah, I mean, this is just the latest blow to French influence on the continent. Very recently, President Macron was talking about democracy. And it's very interesting to know that he didn't even, no comments yet, but I'm sure they're going to condemn this coup, just like they did condemn the previous attempt in 2019. The African Union also will step in to condemn this. But Gabon plays a very strategic role for France. It has two bases in the country. Gabon produces about 200,000 barrels of oil per day. But all of that has not really translated to economic progress for the country. However, I think what is key to watch out for is how ECOWAS is going to respond, because while we have been seeing coups in West Africa and ECOWAS has been in the spotlight, this is now the first we're seeing in Central Africa, and how they're going to respond to this, if they are going to follow the same script as ECOWAS and in tackling the issue in Gabon.
We have, of course, seen this increasingly anti-French sentiment in other West African nations, more notably in Niger recently. Is it a similar situation in Gabon?
Yes, the coup in Gabon I think it's more about dissatisfaction with the electoral process and the fact that one family has ruled the country for about 56 years. Before Ali Bongo, his father, he took over from his father in 2009. And his father ruled for 40 years. So it is seen as the democratic process doesn't really work. And France might not really be keen to complain about this type of dynasty kind of rule. But people in the country, I think, unlike in Mali and Burkina Faso, where we are seeing Russian flags, there's no indication of that yet. So it is, and the sentiment is not necessarily about anti-France, like we're seeing in Niger and Mali, but more about determining the future of Gabon and focusing more on its own electoral processes.
Let's talk a little bit more then about the country. As you say, rich in oil, it's an OPEC member. It's also a key producer of this energy transitional material like magnesium. I mean, we know the borders have been shut. I mean, what are the wider international ramifications of what is going on there?
Yeah, the oil markets are still stable. They don't seem to be responding to this shock. That is because, like I did say, Gabon produces about 200,000 barrels per day, so not so much. Significant, but not enough to cause shock across oil markets. However, I think it's crucial to watch closely how regional countries that are going to respond, because that would determine whether or not this is going to be a coup that stays, or a coup that will not be able to to handle the pressure, and that's something to watch out for. Again, we need to also look at what is the state of former President Bongo, if he's in good condition, or if we've not seen anything about that, and that will be something to watch out for also.
Okay, really good to get your perspective. Ovigway Agwaegu, a security analyst for Afripolitika, speaking to us there from Ankara.